people online who were doing these guided meditations. And my story really starts with somebody who I had been following for a while. So I had just followed a meditation of his, and then he had the next video said why I'm no longer a Christian. And I remember just kind of being stunned, thinking, like, I've never heard of anybody leaving Christianity before. And so I was very nervous, but I did click the video and I watched it. And that was the first time I'd ever been confronted with these ideas that, like, Christianity is dogmatic, and that, you know, then there's the ability to question and to ask questions and to doubt has always kind of been pushed down. And so this guy just had an 8-minute long deconversion kind of blip, and from there the YouTube algorithm. I think it was like 3 videos later I was watching Matt Dillahunty.
That's a jump. That's a bit different from here's why I left my faith to no, you're wrong, right?
Yeah,
so.
I think it was. I think I just got really intrigued by this idea that people can leave their Christianity, and within those first few videos, and started watching deconversion stories, I was kind of starting to feel I could identify with the struggles that these people had while they were in the faith. So I spent a great deal of time trying to find how I could keep my faith, but also incorporate these ideas that in my mind were very, like, non-Christian, kind of went against what I was taught about human nature. So the idea of, you know, mindfulness and self-love and acceptance and all these kind of things that we know now are so helpful with the help of modern psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy and that sort of thing. I wanted to somehow stay a Christian, but still
keep these ideas together, right? Because they made sense, like they helped you, and it was just like, how do you incorporate that into a worldview that, you know, holds it all together?
It teaches very much of, like, this self-denial and this like this one of the ideas is like this: the more of you and less of me. This idea of becoming very, very small and becoming very meek and humble, and those things just weren't jiving really with what I was learning about how to take care of myself mentally. And so I just kept pushing through the questions, and I honestly did think that if I just looked just far enough, I'd find right where I stood in the middle. But I was totally wrong. The questions just kept on coming, and the further I got in, the more intense. I was very intense about trying to figure it out. And so my deconversion happened quite quickly after that, because I kind of went gung-ho into the research and the books and the podcasts, and ended up on the completely opposite side of what I thought I would.
Yeah, and I actually didn't know this before we were talking before the show, but you actually watched my deconversion story too. Yeah, that's wild, because I've heard atheists say, oh, they've watched my story. You're the first person I've heard that's watched it while they were a Christian.
I was still a Christian when I watched your first interview with Anthony, and I was still at that place where I couldn't quite figure out who I agreed with, you know. And I was listening to you and your friend talking, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what I've always been taught as well. It's all comes down to faith, and it is very personal. And, like, I was kind of agreeing with that. And that was a pretty good, like, a good interview. So somewhere in the middle, I had scrolled down to the comments, and I saw somebody wrote, there's more. You have to go check out his next interview. Like, he does another one. And then so of course I clicked on the next one, scrolled down the comments. They're like, dude, this guy has his own show now. You know, like,
yeah, kind of snowballed a little bit after that. But
so to see somebody that thought and processed things pretty, like, identical to how I did, and to see you make that shift, and for me that shift happened over an hour and a half. I don't know. I felt that, and I was like, that's amazing that somebody can change their beliefs. I didn't know people could change their views, couldn't change their opinions. I thought it was
I didn't know.
For me.
I didn't know people could change it kind of as radically as I did either. So, you know, I guess that's why we do what we do now, you know, because we want to show people, hey, you totally can. But
you totally can.
Now, this next part of your story, and I want to try to kind of get to it here before we get to calls, I think is what's not that your story isn't fascinating. It is fascinating to look and see all the 3 youth groups thing. That's wild. That's just nuts. But but like you got into some stuff because I did this kind of a similar thing you did where it was like, oh, my Christianity became more liberal Christianity before it was completely gone. You know, I did kind of incorporate a lot of these ideas, but you went in a different direction, and I don't want to hear a bit more about that.
So kind of at the beginning of my search for peace and mental health, I was kind of looking at everything. I still very strongly identified as a Christian, but I was looking at different ways that people have, you know, just basically the self-help category of the internet. I landed there for a while, and I spent a few months getting really wrapped up in different types of self-help that are not helpful. So we're talking like New Age movements, and I got wrapped up in conspiracy theories like ancient aliens, and you know, just all the different things that they just grabbed a hold of me. I was like, this makes way more sense. But then I got to the next one, and I'm like, no, but this makes way more sense. And then I got into chakras and healing and crystals, and I feel like I just did this huge loop around all the other options on how to take care of myself but still stay spiritual, kind of. And I can honestly say that I still felt like I was a Christian, but I also believed in ancient aliens for a while, to the point where I was convinced that I was an alien. But it wasn't until you get far enough into I didn't get into skepticism right away, basically.
Can I ask you how you were convinced that you were an alien? What was the thought process there?
So it came down to this conspiracy theory about the blood types. So I have a very strange blood type. I think it's AB negative. And if you look up AB negative, you're definitely, like, on the internet, you'll find tons of articles where you are literally seeded by alien DNA. So you're part human, you're a hybrid. And I just dug into that for like quite a while. I thought, and you're reading all these things, and it's kind of the Barnum statements of like, if you are AB negative, like, do you ever feel kind of lost in this world? Do you ever feel a little bit alienated? Do you ever feel like you don't quite you know, you got that imposter syndrome? And I was like, yeah, I totally have that.
Yeah, so does everybody in their early 20s or whatever. Yeah, like,
yeah, exactly,
I don't know how old you were at this point, but like, yeah, like everybody's felt that for sure.
Everybody, so there was my ability to confirm my suspicions was just very all over the place.
Yeah, and like, side note, this is a sidebar, but like, this is why I'm super against like those quizzes and stuff. I don't know, just stuff in general where it's like, oh, it's just entertainment and stuff like that. Like, no, people do take that seriously. Like, that's kind of a thing.
I got really into personality testing, into the Myers-Briggs and the anagrams, and like I was looking, and now I just see I was just looking for anything to make sense, because nothing was making sense to me anymore, and so I was looking at everything. And it wasn't really until I don't remember when it started, when I started realizing that there was a difference between atheism and skepticism, is when I kind of turned, you know, some of these new things around onto my not like deeply held beliefs, but the ones that I was really excited about. I turned it around on there, and I realized that I didn't have any better reason to believe these things either.
Yeah, I think that's very relatable to a lot of people's experiences, I think, and I can speak to this too. It's like, oh, like, I didn't even have a proper idea of what atheism even was.
Yeah,
I didn't even know what that actually meant. I think if you look at my video, I say something like atheism is a belief in science or something bullshit. That's not real. Like, that's not how the community actually operates. But you're taught your whole life what an atheist is. And how terrible they are and awful, but you're not actually, there's no real information of substance that comes from a pulpit that I've seen about atheism. I've never been to a sermon, and I've been to many, that has described atheism in any accurate sense of that word, or at least what the community uses. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had the firm kind of belief that atheists were just deceived by the devil, because in my background, it was all about the spiritual warfare. So I'd never heard this philosophical kind of concrete atheists, you know, say there is no God. I just heard atheists are just totally deceived by the devil, so you can't really trust them.
Yeah, for sure. So
I was hard to break out of.
So you went from thinking you were a Pleiadian to you know, and all this kind of other stuff too, the crystal healing and stuff like that, to just finding this atheist identity, was that just from reading books or watching certain YouTube videos, or like what was the influence there?
The influence there obviously went to YouTube, and I found so many amazing content creators that really helped me dismantle my beliefs. It kind of somewhere in the mix of listening to Apologia and Prophet of Zod, I think it was somewhere in there, and Holy Kool-Aid as well, because they kind of had that same background as me. I felt like I connected with their stuff. And then there was a video by Cosmic Skeptic where he explains, like, I think it's called Atheist Know Thyself. And that's when I kind of was like, oh, wow, I do fall into that category now. And then the challenge there is then to like, no, but are you going to use the label? And it took me a few months after having that moment where I looked myself in the mirror. It took me another 4 or 5 months to start even posting online. But I did, and I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah, like the one time the YouTube algorithm may have done some good for some people, right? Yeah. Instead of leading them down conspiracy rabbit holes, maybe there is the. Because I remember when I was looking up stuff on YouTube, I was looking up like the first time I had heard like the Kalam arguments and stuff like that. Yeah. At first, I was getting apologist stuff, but even if you're looking at that stuff, at least at the time, the related videos started to become like atheist response videos and stuff, and I think that's how kind of I started to get down that rabbit hole a bit. Yeah.
Debates too. Like I watched a bunch of debates, and I still remember saying to my husband, like, I'm watching this debate between a Christian and an atheist, because I said I want to be an educated hater. Actually, it was being kind of
an educated hater. Damn, so, that's a t-shirt right there. I like that.
And I got to the end of, I think it was this, like, my first one, and I was like, damn it, why did they make so much sense? That made so much more sense. And I think it was Matt Dillahunty again. And I think I watched probably every major debate, and I couldn't deny the fact that I just totally agreed with the atheist every time.
Yeah. And so, we didn't touch on this, but at this point you are married at this point. And so what was that like, having a family and having a change in your beliefs?
Not good at first. I definitely had this kind of flailing about phase, I kind of call it, where I hadn't stepped out of the faith yet, but I was really struggling with feeling, I guess most people would call it the angry atheist phase, even though I didn't identify as an atheist at the point. I was an angry deconstructor.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time kind of badgering my husband. We're like, well, what do you think? Because he actually has some background in ministry, so I hounded him for answers, and it wasn't very long after doing that I realized, like, this is totally not helping. This isn't helping my process. This is really hurtful to him. I should stop doing this. So I took my battle, my internal battle, online, and also I found a therapist that helped me work through it.
Yeah, there's the stereotype of the angry atheist phase is true. It's absolutely true. But
people like, we're hurting.
Yeah, like that's what people don't get about this, right? Like they see it as, something to be made fun of because you're going through a phase. It's like, no, but that phase though, like that's like you said, that's a painful process.
That's the thing that's happening. It's not. That's why I like to call it the flailing about phase, because like I was panicked, and I was angry, and I was frustrated, and I was taking it out, like, just in ways that were not helpful, and I didn't even realize I was doing it at the time. But I think that
when you learned that your whole worldview is constructed on lies, and even more so for you, I would think, because I was not as fundamentalist as you. I can't even imagine what it was like to go even that far. Like there's something to be said about that. What does that say about the way that we grew up, where that was our response to this?
I had a hard time. I felt like I really wanted to direct my anger towards. I had very particular experiences in my mind where I could look back now and I'm like, wow, that was abusive. It's emotionally abusive. That's psychologically abusive. These experiences were traumatizing for me. And so I mean, for the most part, I've just kind of spoken out about it instead. And like I said, I have done the work with like a trauma-informed counselor, because it is it was traumatizing. It was the realization that it was traumatizing and accepting that it was traumatizing, and then working through it, and then going one step further and realizing that the people who maybe had been abused in the system because they also were taught the same thing. So I couldn't keep my anger directed at just that next level up. I expanded it out to now my frustration was against the doctor in itself, not just the
people against the system. It's putting the system on trial. Yeah. No, I like it. And that's what, I mean, that's what I think is a good motivation to do what we do. You know, it's not about, we're not angry at, most of us aren't angry at particular individuals because they hurt us in specific ways. Although we've all been hurt by individuals. Like, we are mad at the entire system that brought us here. And like, that's what we're trying to deconstruct. That's what we call out. And that's what we have these conversations for. It's really important to us because yes, we were, I mean, victims of that system. And, but like, you know, we're not trying to stay as victims. We're trying to reach out and help others and talk to people about this and give people on their way.